Hey guys, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I am extremely sleepy. It is 3 a.m. right now. I just got home. Life's been busy, but I gotta record, so I'm gonna record. But today I'm gonna talk about journaling. And yeah, on that note, if everything I ever owned were to be burned and I could only keep one thing, it would without a doubt be, drumroll please, these bad boys, these journals over here. So, those are 6 years worth of my life experiences and my memories, my goals, my struggles, my emotions, everything you can think of. And journaling has, without a doubt, been the single biggest habit that has changed my life. And in some seasons, it's even saved it, honestly. And over the years, right, it's been my life history being written in real time. It's been my safe space when I felt like I didn't have any. And it's served as a compendium for so many thoughts and insights I've gained over the years. And so I've learned a lot just from journaling alone. And I've learned a lot about myself and being human in general. So I would like to share some of those. So the first thing I learned is that no matter who you are, chances are you're probably far more interesting than you think. You may think you're boring or you're stupid or you're uninteresting, and you may think you have nothing good to say. You may think all of your ideas are garbage. But I think one of the biggest things journaling taught me is that you are a lot more interesting than you think, and there's so much in you. You just haven't explored it. Oftentimes, what separates genius isn't our category of thoughts, but just how much we observe them. And I think the biggest example of this is if you've ever encountered a song or a poem or a story or a film wherein you saw it and something made you go, wow, I think I've felt that before. Or wow, I think I've thought that before, right? And this happens all the time. And you realize that, when it comes to the creators of these things that we place on a pedestal, whether it's a musician or a writer or a filmmaker, you realize that you had something in common with them. You had the same thought or feeling as them. The only difference is that they took that idea or that feeling and they explored it more and they did something with it. But the fact of the matter is, we're all human. We're all very complex beings, and there's so much within each of us, whether that's good or bad. But what matters is that there's always something there, and there's always something to be explored. And I think journaling provides such a great avenue for exploring these parts of yourself. In my own case, so many of my best ideas and reflections, whether it's for stories or drawings or even the videos that I make now, were brought about because of journaling. Because I observed my thoughts and my emotions and my experiences, and I tried to extrapolate any learnings that I could get from them. Again, in each of us is an entire universe. No matter how boring or uninteresting you think you are, there's so much to you that you still don't know. There's so much to you that you still haven't explored. And so I would encourage you to journal and, just to explore yourself more, because you're going to be surprised as to what you might be able to find. Number two is that we end up forgetting most of our lives. Whenever I look back at any entry from how many years ago, it just dawns to me how much of our lives we actually forget. It isn't just specific events or memories that we forget, but it's also the way we think and the way we speak and the way we felt things, the way we process things, right? These things change over time. And so for me, journaling serves as a way to preserve who I am at a specific time, because I'm always changing. Everyone's always changing. And we often forget, just exactly how we were. You may think you were a certain way at this point, but if you journaled, right, and you journal about your experiences and your thoughts and your emotions, and you're to look back on it, sometimes you'd be surprised at, what kind of person you actually were or how you actually thought about things. So for me, journaling provides such great sentimental value because it serves as a way to, preserve who you were, and no matter how far down the line you reach, no matter how much you change, you can always go back to your past journal entries to see what kind of person you were, to see what you were doing on a specific date or what you were feeling. And for me personally, I think that's so fascinating. And I think that alone is one of the reasons why I journal. It's just cool to see who I was, at a specific point in time, and just to see how I've changed over the years. The third thing I've learned is that you're not crazy. You're not going crazy. You just need to make space to listen. And I can't count the amount of times I've felt like I was being overwhelmed, or I was extremely anxious, or that, I felt like I was going crazy or spiraling into something. But then I just journal about it and I write about it, I process it, I feel what I need to feel. And doing that doesn't take away the problem, doing that doesn't make the feeling completely go away. But without fail, there's always a sense of relief because I finally made that time to actually feel things and to actually, check in with myself. And it would make sense, that, oh, it's important to check in with yourself regularly. But the thing is, most of us are just caught up in such a fast pace of life where we're just going and going, and we're just working on things, and we have this and we have that. And even when we're doing nothing, we're on our phones stimulating ourselves with constant streams of content, and so we never actually see what's going on in our minds. And so, of course, right, if we never actually take the time to process things and take things one by one, there's going to be a buildup. And, soon enough, you're going to have all these thoughts and emotions that are overwhelming you. But journaling can provide such a great place to just lay everything down on the paper. And in a lot of my worst moments, journaling served as my safe space during times where I felt like I didn't have any. I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone. I didn't feel like I could go to anyone. But paper never judges, and paper is a great listener. Of course, I would always recommend, finding a good group of trusted people that you can give yourself to and you can be vulnerable with. But journaling is a great place to start. And at least in my own case, it was one of the reasons why I survived. It's one of the reasons why I'm here today. And so I'm very grateful, for that, because just making that space to actually explore things, right? And gaining that awareness of yourself and also an acceptance of your situation. That's very important to changing anything, really. The fourth thing I learned was that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. I think as a culture, we stress so much about finding the right answers. And we look for answers from, the people around us. Growing up, we looked for them from our parents and from our teachers and at some point our peers. And now a lot of us look for answers through influencers and idols and gurus and politicians and all of these figures that we see. But the thing is, every person is different and every journey is personal. And so what worked for one person isn't going to work for you necessarily, right? It's like you can watch all of these videos, right? And you can take what you can from what I have to say. But at the end of the day, what I'm sharing here is just my perspective. And what works for me won't necessarily work for you. And that's why I think there's so much value in asking yourself the right questions and figuring out those questions for yourself. Because once you find those answers, you'll know that those answers are actually what works for you. And I think journaling is a really great way to do that, to ask yourself those questions. And I think, you can just look up various journaling prompts and see what you can find. But, right off the top of my head, some good journaling prompts are, things like, oh, what is something you want to do but you're scared to do so? Or what is something that you feel like you give too much of yourself to? Or I remember another good one was something along the lines of, what would you want people to say in your funeral? And given how you're living right now, do you think they would say those things if you were to die? And I think the great thing with these prompts is that they don't give you answers, right? They provide food for thought. And it's really your job to actually find the answers to what you actually want and what works for you. Because again, I think something so many of us do, including myself a lot of the time, is that we try to look for answers to our questions, from other people. And when we take their answers and we try to apply it in our own life, sometimes it will work, but other times it's not going to work. Because at the end of the day, we're different people. What works for one person won't work for another, and that's okay. So ask yourself questions and ask yourself good questions. So the fifth thing I learned about journaling was that there's no right way to journal, at least in my experience. I've tried all kinds of journaling, from bullet journaling to gratitude journaling to the classic diary, write about your day style of journaling. And every time I tried to stick to just one form strictly, I really felt like I was limited. And, it's hard to feel like a chore. You don't need to do it daily either. You don't need to make it a super set routine schedule. But what matters is you're making that space for yourself regularly to actually think about things and, to write things down, to feel things and to process things. And yeah, just by doing that alone regularly, you're gonna learn so much about yourself, your experiences. You're gonna gain a level of self awareness over your thoughts and your emotions. And, over time, it's just gonna improve your life drastically. Like, I really firmly believe that if you journal regularly and you're intentional with that, your life is just gonna get better, like automatically. At least that was the case with my own, right? At the end of the day, you do what you want. I'm just sharing my perspective on journaling, and I hope it's helped in some form or fashion. But yeah, I think that's all for now. That's all for my thoughts on journaling. But I'm gonna go now because I'm very sleepy. I really am very sleepy, and I need to get some sleep. Well, I have to edit this first, but yeah, I'll see what happens. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you all have a good morning. Peace, my fellow peasants.